Recovery and recognition. The first thing Harry noticed when they slowly drifted back to consciousness was the overwhelming smell of disinfectant and something that reminded them of their Aunt Petunia's overly floral perfume. The second thing they noticed was the dull, throbbing pain in their head that felt like someone had been using their skull as a quidditch practice target. The third thing they noticed was the unmistakable sound of Dumbledore's voice, but it was different somehow. And I really must acknowledge my own complicity in this situation, Dumbledore was saying in what sounded like a therapy session rather than a conversation. As a person of privilege, white, male, cisgendered, able-bodied, I recognize that my position of power may have inadvertently contributed to the systemic issues that allowed this crisis to develop. Harry's eyes fluttered open to find themselves in the whitewashed walls of the hospital wing. Dumbledore sat beside their bed, looking deeply uncomfortable and somehow smaller than usual. His normally twinkling eye seemed dimmed, and he was wringing his hands in what appeared to be genuine distress. "Oh, Harry!" Dumbledore exclaimed, noticing their movement. "I'm so relieved you're awake. I was processing my own role in recent events. I've been doing a lot of self-reflection about how my privilege may have blinded me to the dangers you and your friends faced." Harry blinked slowly, trying to process what they were hearing. "Professor, what happened?" "I remember Quirrell, and Voldemort, and then—" "Ah, yes, well." Dumbledore shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Perhaps I should start by saying that I take full responsibility for my failure to create a safe and inclusive environment where you felt comfortable coming to me with your concerns. I realize now that my position as lead facilitator, created an inherent power imbalance that may have prevented open dialogue. But what actually happened?" Harry pressed, sitting up despite the pounding in their head. Dumbledore wrung his hands more vigorously. "Well, you see, it's complicated. I don't want to center my own narrative in your story of trauma and recovery. Perhaps we should wait for Madame Pomfrey to conduct a proper healing circle where we can all share our experiences without hierarchy or judgment." Harry stared at him. "Professor, are you feeling all right?" Dumbledore's eye twitched. "I've been attending some educational seminars about privilege and inclusive leadership. Apparently, my previous management style was somewhat hierarchical." "Right," Harry said slowly. "So what happened after I passed out? Did Voldemort and Quirrell actually go to therapy?" "Well," Dumbledore said, fidgeting with his beard, "that's rather complicated. You see, when the other professors found you unconscious in the chamber, they also found Professor Quirrell having what appeared to be a complete emotional breakdown while Lord Voldemort shouted fashion advice at him." Harry blinked. "Fashion advice? Apparently, your suggestion about couples counseling triggered some sort of psychological breakthrough. Quirrell was sobbing about his daddy issues while Voldemort was critiquing his choice of mascara. It was deeply uncomfortable for everyone involved. So they didn't actually take the stone." "Oh, they took it," Dumbledore said. "But then they got into an argument about whether using it for immortality was morally problematic and ended up leaving it on the floor while they continued their therapy session in the corridor." Harry tried to process this. "So, the stone is safe?" "Safe is a relative term," Dumbledore replied carefully. "It's currently in the possession of the school counselor, who felt it would be therapeutically beneficial for Quirrell and Voldemort to work through their issues before making any major life decisions about eternal life." "We have a school counselor." "We do now. Professor McGonagall insisted we hire one after the incident. Something about the duty of care and preventing students from having to psychoanalyze dark wizards." The door to the hospital wing burst open and Hermione rushed in, followed by Ramad, who was carrying what appeared to be a halal get-well basket. "Curry!" Hermione exclaimed, throwing her arms around them. "We were so worried. When we heard you confronted Voldemort and Quirrell, we thought you might be dead. Instead, you apparently turned a magical duel into a couples therapy session," Ramad added, setting down his basket. "I brought you some dates and honey, excellent for recovery, according to Islamic tradition." "How does everyone know what happened?" Harry asked weakly. "Oh, the whole school knows," Hermione said, pulling up a chair. Professor Snape told everyone during breakfast yesterday. He was quite descriptive. As if summoned by his name, Professor Snape appeared in the doorway, looking even more irritated than usual. Well, he drawled, swaggering into the room. If it ain't the little therapist who thinks they can fix everybody's problems with some touchy-feely bullshit. Professor Snape, Dumbledore said nervously, perhaps we could use more appropriate language. Appropriate? Snape laughed, a harsh sound that made everyone wince. Man, you want to talk about appropriate? This little gal. Dumbledore corrected quickly. Harry uses they/them pronouns. Snape rolled his eyes. This little person just handed the most dangerous magical artifact in existence to a couple of psychopaths because they thought therapy would fix them. You know what's not appropriate? That dumb shit right there. Professor Snape. Hermione gasped. You can't use that kind of language about mental health treatment. Watch me, Snape replied. And before you start crying about microaggressions or whatever, let me tell you something about your boy Quirrell. That nigger was crazy long before Voldemort showed up. I've been telling you all he was off his rocker, but nobody wanted to listen to the angry black man, right? The room fell into stunned silence. Dumbledore looked like he was about to faint. Professor, he whispered, you can't use that word. What word? Snape asked innocently. Crazy? Of his rocker? Or are you talking about nigger? Because last I checked, that's my word to use. But it's offensive. To who? Me? I think I get to decide what offends me, old man. Harry watched this exchange with growing fascination. Snape was somehow managing to make everyone in the room uncomfortable while technically not doing anything wrong. Anyway, Snape continued, your little therapy session didn't work out so well. Quirrell and Voldemort are currently holed up in the abandoned classroom on the 3rd floor, having what sounds like the world's most dysfunctional relationship counseling session. And guess who gets to listen to it all day because my office is right next door? What are they talking about? Harry asked, genuinely curious. Oh, you know, the usual shit. Voldemort's abandonment issues, Quirrell's daddy problems, whether sharing of body counts as a moving too fast in a relationship. Last night I heard them arguing about whether Voldemort's snake is a phallic symbol for 3 hours straight. That's actually kind of what I expected, Harry admitted. Yeah, well, your expectations are about to get a whole lot weirder, Snape said. Because apparently the Ministry of Magic has decided that your little intervention was an innovative magical conflict resolution and they want to give you an award. An award? The Order of Merlin, 3rd class, for outstanding achievement in peaceful resolution of dark magic conflicts through applied psychology. Harry stared at him. You're joking? Do I look like I joke about stupid shit like this? Snape replied. The minister himself is coming to present it, along with a delegation from the Department of Magical Mental Health who want to study your techniques. But I didn't have any techniques. Harry protested. I just talked to them. Yeah, and somehow that worked better than the last 50 years of magical law enforcement, Snape said. Which, frankly, says more about the competence of the ministry than it does about your therapeutic skills. Hermione was taking notes frantically. This is incredible. Harry, you've revolutionized magical conflict resolution. You've proven that dialogue and understanding can overcome violence and hatred. I've proven that Voldemort and Quirrell are both completely insane, Harry corrected. Normal dark wizards don't stop trying to kill you because you suggest couples counseling. But that's exactly the point. Hermione explained. You recognized that their conflict was rooted in psychological issues rather than pure evil. You addressed the underlying trauma instead of just treating the symptoms. I got lucky, Harry said flatly. If Voldemort had been competent, I'd be dead right now. Don't sell yourself short, Ramad interjected. In Islam, we believe that Allah guides those who seek peace. Your actions were divinely inspired. Or, Snape said, they were the result of a traumatized child projecting their own psychological issues onto a couple of dangerous psychopaths. which, coincidentally, is exactly what I told the Ministry investigators. You spoke to investigators? Dumbledore asked nervously. Course I did. They wanted to know how a first-year student managed to neutralize the Dark Lord without using magic. I told them it was because the Dark Lord is a pathetic incel who's never had a healthy relationship in his life, and Quirrell is a closeted homosexual with severe attachment issues. Professor Snape, Hermione said, you can't use terms like incel and make assumptions about people's sexual orientation. Why not? I'm describing observable behavior patterns. Voldemort displays classic signs of misogynistic entitlement and sexual frustration. Quirrell exhibits textbook symptoms of repressed homosexuality and codependency. These aren't value judgments, they are clinical observations. But those are harmful stereotypes. Are they? Because from where I'm sitting, they're accurate descriptions of two individuals who happen to fit certain psychological profiles. The fact that you're uncomfortable with those profiles doesn't make them less valid. Harry rubbed their temples, feeling a headache coming on. Can we please not turn this into a debate about political correctness? I just want to know if I'm going to get in trouble for giving Voldemort the gender-critical stone. Actually, Dumbledore said, about that. The stone wasn't real. Everyone turned to stare at him. I beg your pardon. Hermione said. The gender-critical stone that you retrieved from the mirror was a fake, Dumbledore explained. Nicholas Flaming and I created it as a decoy. The real stone was destroyed months ago. So, Voldemort and Quirrell are fighting over a fake? Harry asked. Essentially, yes. Though they don't know that yet. When are you going to tell them? Well, Dumbledore said uncomfortably, the school counselor feels that revealing this information might be therapeutically counterproductive at this stage of their healing journey. Their healing journey? Snape snorted. Man, you people are delusional. They're terrorists, not patients. Everyone deserves the opportunity for growth and redemption, Dumbledore replied primly. Yes? Tell that to the people they murdered. Violence begets violence, Professor. If we can break the cycle through understanding and compassion. If you can break the cycle through understanding and compassion, then why did you spend the last 10 years teaching children how to hex each other? Snape interrupted. Why do we have a defense against the dark arts class if we're supposed to talk our way out of everything? Dumbledore opened his mouth, then closed it again, looking confused. Because, Hermione said triumphantly, Harry's proven that there's a better way. Violence isn't the answer. Violence is exactly the answer, Snape replied. It's just not the only answer. And sometimes, when you're dealing with people who've chosen violence as their primary method of problem solving, you need to speak their language. But Harry didn't use violence. Harry got lucky. And if you think that luck is going to hold out the next time they encounter a dark wizard, you're setting them up to get killed. That's a very pessimistic worldview, Rahmad observed. In Islam, we believe that Allah protects those who work for peace. Yes? How'd that work out for all the Muslims who got massacred by other Muslims in the last century? Snape asked. Rahmad looked uncomfortable. That's different. How's it different? Because those weren't true Muslims. True Muslims don't kill other Muslims. So they were fake Muslims? Like the fake stone. That's not what I meant. No, I think that's exactly what you meant. You doing the same thing as Dumbledore, pretending that people who do bad things aren't real members of your group. Muslims who kill aren't true Muslims. Wizards who use violence aren't following the true path of peace and understanding. There's nothing wrong with having ideals, Hermione said defensively. There's everything wrong with letting your ideals blind you to reality, Snape replied. Harry succeeded because they happened to encounter two individuals whose psychological profiles made them susceptible to therapeutic intervention. That's not a strategy, it's a coincidence. So what would you have done? Harry asked. I'd have killed them, Snape said simply. Both of them. Quickly, efficiently, and without any of this touchy-feely bullshit about trauma and healing. That's horrible. That's practical. Dead terrorists don't terrorize anyone. But then you're just perpetuating the cycle of violence. No, I'm ending it. Permanently. The room fell silent again. Harry looked around at their friends and teachers, realizing that they were all living in completely different worlds with completely different rules. "Professor Snape," they said finally, "can I ask you something?" "Shoot. Do you think I made the right choice?" Snape considered this for a long moment. "You made the choice that felt right to you at the time, given the information you had and the psychological pressure you were under. Whether it was objectively right depends on the outcome, which we won't know for years." That's not really an answer. It's the only honest answer I can give you. You want certainty? Study mathematics. You want moral clarity? Join a religion. You want to understand people? Get used to ambiguity. That's very philosophical for someone who just advocated murder, Hermione pointed out. I advocated pragmatism, Snape corrected. Murder is a legal term. Killing dangerous people to protect innocent people is called a doing your job. Whose job? Anyone who's capable of doing it and gives a damn about the innocent people. But who decides who's dangerous? Who decides who's innocent? The people with the power to make those decisions. Which, in this case, was Harry. Harry felt a chill run down their spine. You're saying I had the power to decide whether Voldemort and Quirrell lived or died. You had the power to influence that decision, yes. Just like you had the power to influence whether they got the stone or not. But I'm just a kid. You're a kid with magical powers in a magical world where children routinely face life or death situations. Your age doesn't change the consequences of your actions. That's a lot of responsibility. Welcome to adulthood, Snape said. But Harry shouldn't have to deal with that kind of responsibility. Hermione protested. They're only 11. And how old were you when you decided to break school rules to help them? How old was Harry when they decided to come out as transgender? That's different. Time. Because those are personal choices that only affect ourselves. Really? Harry's gender identity doesn't affect how other people treat them. Your activism doesn't affect how people respond to you. Hermione fell silent, looking troubled. Look, Snape continued, I'm not saying Harry should have killed anybody. I'm saying that pretending they didn't have that option, or that choosing not to use it was automatically the right choice, is naive and potentially dangerous. So what are you saying? I'm saying that moral choices are complicated, and the people who tell you otherwise are usually trying to sell you something. Harry made a choice based on their values and their understanding of the situation. Whether that choice leads to good outcomes or bad outcomes depends on factors beyond their control. Like what? Like whether Voldemort and Quirrell actually follow through on their therapy commitment. Like whether the fake stone is enough to satisfy their psychological needs. Like whether other dark wizards decide to copy their approach or try to exploit their perceived weakness. Harry groaned. I hadn't thought about that. Of course you hadn't. You're 11. But that doesn't mean the consequences aren't real. So what do I do now? You learn from the experience. You pay attention to what happens next. And you remember that good intentions don't always lead to good outcomes. That's terrifying. Yeah, it is. But it's also liberating. Pan. Because once you accept that you can't control the outcomes, you can focus on making the best choices you can with the information you have. And that's all anyone can do. Harry lay back against their pillows, feeling overwhelmed. I think I need to process all of this. Take your time, Dumbledore said gently. And remember, whatever happens, you have the support of your friends and teachers. Some of your teachers, Snape corrected. The ones who aren't complete morons. Professor Snape. Hermione exclaimed. What? I'm being supportive. In my own way. Your way is very direct. My way is honest. Which is more than I can say for most of the adults in this school. What do you mean? I mean that everyone else is so worried about protecting Harry's feelings that they're not preparing them for the reality of what they're going to face. This isn't going to be the last time they encounter dark wizards. And the next ones might not be as psychologically unstable as Quirrell and Voldemort. So what do you suggest? I suggest that Harry learn how to defend themselves. Properly. With magic that actually works, not just therapeutic conversation skills. But violence shouldn't be the first resort. It should be an available resort. There's a difference. Harry listened to this debate with growing exhaustion. Everyone seemed to have strong opinions about what they should do, but nobody seemed to agree on anything. Can I make a suggestion? They said finally. Everyone turned to look at them. Maybe we could focus on the fact that everyone survived, and nobody got permanently hurt, and Voldemort doesn't have the stone, and call that a win. That's a very mature perspective, Dumbledore said approvingly. It's also a very limited perspective, Snape added. But it's a start. What do you mean, limited? I mean that survival isn't the same as success. And success isn't the same as learning from your mistakes. So what should I learn from this? That's up to you to figure out. But whatever you learn, make sure it's based on what actually happened, not what you wanted to happen or what other people think should have happened. Harry nodded slowly. I think I can do that. Good. Because next year, when you're in my defense against the dark art class, I'm going to teach you how to kill people. You're teaching defense against the dark arts next year. Hermione asked, looking horrified. Somebody has to. And apparently, I'm the only teacher in this school who's willing to prepare students for the real world. The real world doesn't have to be violent. The real world is exactly as violent as the people in it choose to make it. And right now, there are a lot of people choosing violence. Then we need to change that. Good luck with that. But while you're working on your social revolution, maybe learn how to protect yourself and the people you care about. That's what we're trying to do. No, you're trying to change other people's behavior. I'm talking about preparing for the possibility that you might fail. The conversation might have continued, but it was interrupted by a commotion in the corridor outside. Through the open door, Harry could hear what sounded like a very heated argument. I told you, the flower crown doesn't go with the Death Eater robes. And I told you, fashion is subjective. You can't just dismiss my aesthetic choices because they don't fit your narrow definition of dark and intimidating. Your aesthetic choices are undermining my entire brand. Your brand is toxic masculinity and emotional unavailability. My brand is fear and respect. Your brand is unprocessed trauma and an inability to form healthy relationships. Everyone in the hospital wing looked at each other. Are those? Harry began. Quirrell and Voldemort, Snape confirmed. Still working through their issues. How long has this been going on? 3 days. Non-stop. And they still don't know the stone is fake. Nope. They're too busy arguing about whether using it for immortality would be ethically problematic to actually try using it. Harry stared at the door, listening to the ongoing argument about fashion and relationship dynamics. You know what, they said finally. I think I'm okay with how this turned out. Really? Hermione asked. Really? I mean, nobody's dead, nobody's evil plan succeeded, and apparently I've managed to turn the most dangerous dark wizard in history into someone who argues about flower crowns. That's actually pretty good. It's fucking hilarious is what it is, Snape said. I haven't been this entertained since I started teaching. Language, Professor, Dumbledore said weakly. Man, if you think the fucking is bad language, wait until you hear what Voldemort called Quirrell's skincare routine yesterday. I don't want to know, Dumbledore said quickly. Neither did I, but I heard it anyway. Thin walls. The argument in the corridor was getting louder, with what sounded like someone throwing things. Should we do something? Harry asked. Like what? Snape replied. They're not hurting anyone except each other's feelings. Let them work it out. But what if they reconcile and decide to go back to being evil? Then we'll deal with that when it happens. But right now, they're too busy having a domestic dispute to threaten anyone. Is this really how dark wizard conflicts usually get resolved? Rahmad asked. Hell no, Snape replied. This is completely unprecedented. Which is why the Ministry is so interested in studying Harry's techniques. I don't have techniques. That's what makes it so interesting. You succeeded through sheer dumb luck and psychological insight. It's like accidentally discovering a new form of magic. Great, Harry muttered. Now I'm going to have to explain to everyone how I accidentally turned the Dark Lord into a relationship counseling case study. Could be worse, Snape said. How? You could have killed them and had to explain why you murdered 2 people as a first-year student. That's actually a good point. I have them occasionally. The argument in the corridor reached a crescendo, with what sounded like someone dramatically declaring that they were done with this relationship and storming off. Well, Hermione said, that sounded final. Give it 10 minutes, Snape said. They'll be back to arguing about colour coordination. He was right. 10 minutes later, Harry could hear Quirrell's voice apologising tearfully and Voldemort grudgingly accepting the apology while critiquing his emotional processing techniques. You know what the really funny part is? Snape said. What? They're actually having healthier relationship discussions than most of the adult couples I know. That's depressing, Harry said. That's life, Snape replied. Welcome to the real world, kid. It's weirder than you think. Harry settled back against their pillows, listening to the ongoing therapy session in the corridor and reflecting on the strangest year of their already strange life. Maybe Snape was right. Maybe the real world was exactly as weird as the people in it chose to make it. And maybe, just maybe, that wasn't such a bad thing after all.